Welcome to episode 93 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Michael Polish, who recently directed Amnesiac, starring Wes Bentley and Kate Bosworth. He got his start writing and directing a film called Twin Falls, Idaho, which was a big indie hit, and we talk about how that got his career started, as well as talking about his most recent film. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 93. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide: how to write a professional logline and career letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. I'm still doing rewrites on the script that I wrote in a week. I've mentioned that script a couple of times on the podcast. I met with the director again last week and we went through another round of notes. The notes are actually pretty mild, considering I wrote the script in a week. So I think he's pretty happy with it, and I think it's actually slowly making the script a little bit better. He was actually supposed to start shooting this week, but it looks like it got pushed back another week, so hopefully he'll start shooting next week. As a screenwriter, until the thing actually starts shooting, I'm always a little bit worried that something will fall through, something will go wrong, and he won't be able to actually shoot the movie. So I've just got my fingers crossed, and I'm just hoping that he does start next week. It just keeps getting pushed back week after week, so hopefully next week he'll be all set. It seems like he's got all the production crew. He's got his cast in place. He's got his production crew in place. So just a couple of odds and ends, and hopefully he'll wrap those things up this week, and we'll be off to the races. And I got the other thing that I'm working on was I got the outline polished up for the spoof. That's another writing assignment. I mentioned that one last week. So I'm hopefully going to dig into the script this week. I sent the outline to the producers on Friday. It's now Monday. So hopefully they'll give me back some notes. Hopefully those notes will not be too bad. And then I can actually begin writing the script. What I'm really hoping to do is to get to page 55 by the end of the week. What I found writing that script in a week was once I got to page 55, and keep in mind this only is going to be an 80-page script. So when you're on page 55, you've only got 25 pages left. You're not at the halfway point. You're really at like the 3/4 point or maybe 2/3 point. Really, like maybe I'd say the 3/4 point. That's kind of the whole point. Once you get to page 55 in a short script like this, it's all of Act 1, most of Act 2, and then it's just purely a function of going back or going and paying off all those things that you've set up, finishing out Act 2, and then polishing up Act 3. I found that in writing that script a week, once I got to page 55, it was really all downhill. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do. Get to page 55 by the end of this week, and then hopefully it'll all be downhill from then on. So that's the goal. We'll see if I actually get that far, but I think I probably can. I mean, that's only about 12, 14 pages a day. Should get me there. 15 pages, not even 15 pages a day for 4 days, and I should be on 55 by Friday. So that's my goal. Anyways, that's what I'm working on right now. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing Michael Polish. Here is the interview. Welcome, Michael, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe we can just go back to your early days as a filmmaker, even before Twin Falls, Idaho. Just tell us how you got started. Were you, one of these kids running around making short films as a child? Just where did your beginnings come from?
Well, since I'm the product of the 80s, we didn't have access to a lot. We had video cameras, but they weren't like the HDs we have today or Canon 5D. So I was running around more with a Super 8, and then I got into 16, straight 16, and an Aeroflex camera, and then I went to CalArts, which is in Santa Clarita, and that sort of fed my interest in film. Even though I was in the art program, I was able to do some film stuff there and really heavily into photography.
Okay, perfect. And I noticed your very first IMDb credit is an acting credit on Hellraiser. And what's that?
That's fun. That was
okay. But was that your intention originally? Did you start out thinking I'm going to be an actor, and then you just got into writing and directing?
No, I was actually doing a favor for the special effects. The guy doing it, Gary Tunnicliffe. He was the special effects makeup artist.
Okay.
He was doing Twin Falls, Idaho. And we kind of exchanged doing that so he could do the twins for Twin Falls, Idaho. So it wasn't a real acting thing, even though I ended up doing a few pieces after that.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so let's dig into Twin Falls, Idaho for a second. Where did that idea come from? How did you guys come up with that?
Well, we were really fascinated with Ching Bunker, which coined the phrase Siamese twins because they were Asian, and it's been a long time since we even looked at them. But when we were growing up, the Guinness Book of World Record had a picture of them inside of it, and it was the longest lasting Siamese twins. And that basis of having conjoined twins sort of launched our story point of what would it be like to be stuck together in a severe way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and tell us about that film, and just in terms of how you got that film made. I mean, I think on IMDb it was a $500,000 budget. I mean, that's not chopped liver for a first-time filmmaker. So maybe you could talk a little bit about just how you went about raising that money and getting that film produced.
Yeah, that movie was just under $500,000, I think, when we finished it. We did it in just about 17 days out here in downtown LA, and found a building that we could keep it sort of contained, so because it was a small movie, and when you're looking for financing, people just don't consider Siamese twins your first thing they really want to do. And so we said, we'll play the twins, and we'll make this quite easy, and we'll get, we'll try and make the story quite simple. And it's about 2 years of financing because there was some studio interest in it, but it was always quite small, and they weren't quite sure how we were going to do it because they kept thinking that the budget was going to be huge because of the CGI. They didn't know how we were going to actually bind ourselves together. So after we got that, there was a financer out of Seattle who was doing small independent films, and she actually had sisters that were twins. She goes, I understand where you're coming from, and that's the connection, I think, when you're making independent for financing. Somebody has to connect to that story to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you can just talk about, okay, so you guys wrote this script and you said there was some interest from some bigger companies. How did you get that script out there back? I mean, this was the mid-90s, but what were you doing to just be in the industry enough to get that script to people and have that interest?
I was actually walking my dog. True story. I did a short film. I was shooting a lot of short films, and one was playing at the DGA on Sunset, just I guess it's just west of Fairfax. DJ building, and I was walking home with actually a film canister, and a guy walked by and said, "What's in your can?" I go, "That's my film." And he was a neighbor of mine, and it was actually John Grice, who's the actor who has been in a bazillion films, and he ended up being in 4 of my other films. But he said, "Can I see it?" I said, "Yeah." And so I still had to get it transferred to videotape back in the 90s, so I took film and I got it transferred at a transfer house, and I dropped off the video cassette. And he was doing a movie called Casualties, and I think it was starring Mark Harmon. And Rena Ronson, who was running the Transatlantic that ended up being sold to Paramount, said, "I saw your short film. Would you come in and start talking to me about..." And so it just started to escalate. And I had another script at that point that I had written with Mark called North Fork. And that was our third film, and it was so ambitious for our first film. She said, "What else do you have?" And I said, "We have another movie called Twin Falls, Idaho about conjoined twins." And she goes, "If you send me that, I'll make it." And it was intriguing enough for her to keep it going.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, that's a good story. Okay, so let's talk just a minute about, and then I promise we'll get on to your latest film. One of the things I'm always curious about, and I've had several people on the podcast that had, kind of a big breakout film hit, and I would certainly say Twin Falls, Idaho. I mean, it didn't, smash box office records, but it was definitely a big, critical hit, and everybody in the industry knew it. And I would say it's kind of best for doing a low budget independent film. It's kind of best case scenario, is that it gets out there, gets some critical, and kind of, leads you to your next film, hopefully. And I wonder if you can speak to what does your career look like after, this type of a film? And just again, doing research on this interview, it seemed like you guys continue to struggle with Norfolk and with Jackpot.
Right.
And I think it's so important, for new filmmakers to realize that, like, there's so many people I talk to, they have this attitude that if I can just get that first film made, it's all smooth sailing. And I think so often that's unfortunately not the case. There's still a lot of struggle left to be done, even after your first film. So maybe you can talk about what did your career look like after this, pretty good success?
I couldn't have picked a better debut to make a movie that ended up taking me around the world and showing it in 27 countries. And I was so eager to come back after a year of touring with this film, going to Germany, going to London, going to Asia, going to Japan, that I wanted to get back and make a second film badly, because I felt like here comes my sophomore slump, because this is going to be rough. Because getting the Vanity Fairs, being in all the different magazines, you're now touted as the new indie filmmakers that on the scene. A lot of doors open, and a lot of big doors open, where they see you fitting in. And Warner Brothers was probably the biggest push that we went into, and we ended up doing a film with them called The Astronaut Farmer, which probably could have been any film after Twin Falls, Idaho. It was a more accessible movie. It had a story that could go to home video quite better, and so we just decided when we landed after our tour, we were just going to make a movie, and it was going to be even cheaper than Twin Falls, Idaho, and it was called Jackpot. So we went out and just made this movie in 15 days, I think it was, 15 days, and I think it was like $200,000 or $300,000, and we just went around the valley and shot this movie about karaoke singer, and it was refreshing to do something that quick, even though Twin Falls was only 17 days, a couple more days. We felt like we were with that movie for a lot longer, and Jackpot was quicker. Unfortunately, Jackpot opened about a week before 9/11 happened in 2001. And so that was just buried. But the bright spot of Jackpot was that it won probably the most awards that we've ever seen, because of just the Cassavetes way of making that movie was just a camera and a car and a bunch of actors doing Victory Boulevard back and forth.
Now, did you have a sense that things were going to be tough? Deals were not going to be coming quickly. Why did you decide to just jump in and make this? You had been out on the press tour so long, you just wanted to be filmmakers again.
Yeah, and I was always I spoke to a lot of there's a notion of looking at a career as opposed to your next hit, and I felt that we wanted to look at what our career would be like after maybe a dozen movies, as opposed to making one movie every 12 years. It's still a learning process. So you go out and you shoot and you shoot and you shoot and you write and you shoot and you see what makes it on the screen. And you're also learning, what works for cinema. And without working and writing and doing it, there's a lot of screenwriters that will write their first screenplay and protect it as the Holy Grail, and they get it made and it doesn't turn out, and they go, wow, where do I go from there? Where do I start from? I had everything put into this screenplay, and you should probably write a dozen of them and see if you can make 6 of them. And if 3 come out, you're pretty good. Your average is pretty good.
Yeah. Sound advice. I appreciate that. So let's go ahead and let's dig into your current film, Amnesiac, starring Kate Bosworth and Wes Bentley. Maybe to start out, you can give us just a quick sort of pitch or logline of the film. I always link to the trailer in the show notes, so people can definitely check that out. But if people haven't seen the trailer, maybe you can just give it a quick pitch.
Well, I'd say it's in the vein of the Kathy Bates movie, where a guy wakes up in the bed and doesn't quite sure, he's not sure where he's at. It's Wes Bentley wakes up one morning and looks at this woman that's serving him soup and says, "How's it going?" And she said, "Hi, I'm your wife," and you're not quite sure from that point on. It's a real mystery, That doesn't give it justice, but that's basically what it is. I mean, it's basically a one-liner: a guy waking up in a room and doesn't know anything.
So how did you get involved with this film? You're the director, but not the writer. So how did you come on to this project?
It was sent to Kate originally, Kate Bosworth, and she handed it over to me and said, "I think with the way you make movies, I think you could probably do this. It's not a huge budget, and it's quite contained. This is something you want to look at." So she sent me the script, and I read it, and I said, there's something really great about this. But maybe if we took it a step farther and made her feel like she's in a period piece, it'd give it a more psychological. You never know the characters' names in the movie. It's just a man and a woman. You never know. They never call each other by their names. And her desire is to have a 1950s nuclear family, which is married, have kids, and live in a house. But her environment, she's built up to be in the 50s, even though it's a modern day movie. She's stuck in another time, and that made it very psychological. So that was my element to the screenplay. I was saying, we already know she's a bit psycho, but what if we take her to another level, which is she thinks she's living in the 50s.
Okay. And maybe you can speak to a little bit just about your relationship with the writers. I mean, you have a writing career of your own, so I'm sure you come at this as a director and a writer. How did you work with the writers on making those kinds of changes? Do you implement themselves? Did you work with the writers? I'd just be curious to hear, because I think there's a lot of screenwriters out there that are going to get their scripts to directors who are also writers, and what does that relationship typically look like?
There's there's always a couple of ways of dealing with this. Sometimes the writer's so intrinsic with the script that you're working hand in hand. I've written a lot of my own screenplays, and I've been able to take those and translate those into screen by myself, and sometimes with my brother Mark. With this script, it had a writer, and it was a screenplay that was around for a while. So I didn't know the original writer, and then another writer came on that was maybe a year in front of me, and he gave it a really, really nice polish. And then when I got it, I was able to sort of have free reign with it, in the way that, because I had to make it into a budget, it was a bigger budget screenplay, that I was looking at ways to keep it even more contained. So without without insulting the writers that were on this before, all I did was clean it up for the locations and the environment, and made sure Wes was comfortable with what he was saying, made sure Kate was comfortable, because it's really a two-hander. Mm-hmm. Whatever came out of them was that really the movie really lent them. The heaviness was just those two in every scene, and so when I talked to them, I said, "Are you capable of handling all this dialogue that's quite big?" And so that's basically it. I've worked on movies where I've been able to just call the writer and say, "Can you look at this a different way?" And I've been able to not have any involvement with the writer, so it really changes a lot of things.
Yeah. And you mentioned, as you were pitching this, you did mention misery, and I was curious if that came up a lot, not only in directing, but in the marketing of this film. Was that a worry that you would be too closely compared to something like that?
Well, it's such a great movie, and it's something that's ingrained in us as a good piece of how to make a movie that's contained and between two people. When you watch Amnesiac, it only falls in line with the two characters, one being captive and one being the fan. It gets a little more nuts. Ours gets a little more nuts than that movie. I think if it's compared in a good way, I think it's going to be okay. It'll be.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe you can talk a little bit too about just in the getting this project going. How, I understand, obviously, you said Kate Bosworth got the script originally, so her involvement was pretty early on. But when did Wes Bentley come into it, and did that impact the financing of this movie? I often wonder what comes first with a film like this. Is it the actors get attached first, or is it then and then they get financing, or do you get financing and then you try and get these actors attached?
When it goes to independence, every way possible, and he was way but loose. I mean, really. This one was financed based on Kate, and you'd want to get a male lead of some sort of notoriety. They could play the name game, and they want to go. If they could put George Clooney in bed, they'd do it. Mm-hmm. But that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas Wes is somebody I've wanted to work with for a while, and I knew his brother because his brother worked with me on another movie, and so I knew that our paths were going to cross eventually. And he's a very, very nice guy and really wonderful to work with. And so once Kate decided that she wanted to do it, we were just looking for the guy that she would hold captive. And so we kept going, which guy do you want to keep in bed? She goes, I think it'd be great if Wes wanted to do this. And so I was able to call Wes up and have probably a more frank conversation with him about doing this, as opposed to really going after somebody that might not work.
Yeah. My wife loves Wes Bentley too. So maybe you can talk about the release schedule of Amnesiac. How can people see it? When's it going to be theatrically released, and then when's it going to be released on video on demand?
This is a day on date movie, which I've never been a part of, which means it's in theaters and iTunes, and I believe video on demand the same day, which is August 14th. I've never done this before, but I think it's exciting because I know a lot of people who wanted to see my movies in the past couldn't see them. So you could pretty much know August 14th. If you know it's out, you can see it any way you want.
Okay, perfect. And I always like to wrap up these interviews. What's the best way for people to follow you? If you're on Twitter, you can mention your Twitter handle, Facebook, a blog, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and I can link to all that stuff in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm a basic Twitter person. It's just Michael Polish.
Okay, perfect.
You'll see Amnesiac stuff on there.
Okay.
We were able to release a lot of different set stills and things that nobody gets to see before, that's what I really like about social media, is that we have more access, and we can also push ideas that maybe people want to see. That's nice.
Yeah. And Amnesiac, it has a Twitter page and a Facebook page as well?
It has a Facebook page. I'm not sure it has Twitter, but, Kate is Kate is really well linked to all that stuff. So if you look at Kate Bosworth, you'd see it too.
Okay, perfect. I'll track all that stuff down, and I'll put that in the show notes. So, Michael, I appreciate your coming on the show and talking with me. This is an interesting interview. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Yeah,
bye.
Cheers.
I just want to mention two things we're doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, we've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit one log line per newsletter. I went and emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, we have around 170 producers who have signed up to receive this newsletter. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in the pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplay.com/select. And secondly, we've partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting leads services so we can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 10 to 12 high-quality paid screenwriting leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or are actively looking to hire screenwriters for a specific project. If you sign up at SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas. A lot of times these producers have a novel, or they have a comic book, or they have a treatment, and they need a screenwriter to actually turn it into a screenplay. That's very common. There's a lot of producers on here looking for shorts. There's a lot of people trying to produce shorts right now, so there's a lot of producers actively looking for screenwriters who have short scripts. Generally, I would say in the 5 to 10 page range is what constitutes a short film. And these leads are emailed out, as I mentioned, several times per week. As the leads come in, we send them out. To sign up, go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. Again, go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. I recently set up a success stories page for people who have had success through the various SYS services. So if you want to check out what some other people who have tried our services are saying, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. You can read testimonials from a bunch of people who have used our services with some success. Also, if you have had some success with the SYS services, please do let me know. These stories are very inspiring. They're inspiring for others to read. So I'd love to share your story either on our success page or even on the podcast. Perhaps I could interview you. So if you've used the SYS Select services, please do get in touch with me. A lot of times I've gotten in touch with people, months and years later. In fact, setting up this success page, I went back to a bunch of people, and there were people that had success a year or two ago with our services, and I didn't even know about it. So I know there's got to be a lot of other people out there who have used various SYS Select services and have had some success, but I don't necessarily ever know about it because most of the time, once the screenwriter has success, they start interfacing with the producer directly, and I'm kind of out of the loop. So if you've had success, please do interview me. As I said, these stories are very inspiring. I'd love to have you on the podcast. If you've had some success with the SYS services, I'd love to post your testimonial on the success stories page. So next week on the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Matt Dye, who is the Screenplay and Teleplay competition director at the Austin Film Festival. The Austin Film Festival is a great festival for screenwriters. We talk through the whole process of submitting scripts, what you can expect if you place highly in the contest, how the festival works, how the vetting process works, kind of how the festival formed, where its origins, how it became such a screenwriting-centric film festival. Really from soup to nuts, everything Austin Film Festival we kind of cover in this interview. So if you've ever wondered about the Austin Film Festival, wonder if it's a good fit for you, or just been interested in maybe going to it, this would be a great interview for you, as a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions about it, and hopefully a lot of the questions you might have are answered in that. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to make a couple comments about the interview today. I've talked about this before on the podcast. When people typically talk about independent films, they're usually referring to Sundance, art house types of films, which is exactly what Twin Falls, Idaho was. But really, the vast majority of independent films are low-budget genre films, horror, thrillers, action films. There's literally hundreds of these films, if not thousands, being made every year. And that's sort of what I spend my time highlighting on this podcast. A lot of the films that come through there are these genre films. A lot of them don't get big theatrical releases, but for the most part, a lot of these films are making money. The producers are very savvy on international markets. They're savvy about casting, and you can look at a lot of these films, listen to the interviews, and you can tell that the producers and the people backing these movies are generally very experienced. And so these movies are a business, and that really comes first and foremost. Hopefully this podcast can illuminate the screenwriting opportunities that exist in this area. This is where the most opportunity for screenwriters lies, especially newer screenwriters. But it's actually the thing that's probably talked about least. You go to most screenwriting books, screenwriting seminars, other podcasts, most of the people are talking about studio films. If they're talking about independent films, they're typically talking about these Sundance art house films, which again, for the most part, those are not even a business model. Most of them lose money, and most of them never see the light of day. Most of them don't make it to Sundance. So these genre films are really a lot of good opportunities. The producers are not as, piped in to the top writers. The top writers are typically doing studio films, so they have to, be a little more creative in where they find their material, which means they're generally very open to newer writers. A lot of these movies are not all that great. A lot of them, as I said, they're low-budget genre movies, action, horror, thriller movies, and a lot of them are pretty schlocky. I think Amnesiac is a good example of an elevated genre movie, and I think it's interesting what the producers did with this movie. The producers clearly set out to make a thriller that they thought they could make their money back. I mean, in its essence, this really is one of these low-budget genre movies that I'm talking about, but they hired Michael to direct it, and I think they probably did that because they knew he would bring an artistic sensibility to the film, and he did that. And I think this film is a great example of, as I said, it's definitely a genre movie. I think this film has a good chance of actually making its money back because it's a genre film, but by the same token, it's also very well cast, obviously, with Wes Bentley and Kate Bosworth, but it also fulfills all those sort of typical genre tropes. And I think it will, as I said, I think it has a good chance of making its money back, but I think also Michael brought a real artistic sensibility to it. So it's a kind of one of these elevated genre movies. And I think this is really kind of the best of what you can hope for in these types of films. And I think it's worth going and checking out this film just for that. As I said, this is a business model. This is an actual business here where people are producing these types of movies. They're looking for material. It's very contained. There's a lot of lessons you can learn about this. It's very contained. Almost the entire movie takes place in one house. They did do a couple shots outside of it, but I would say 80-90% of this film was inside this one house. So it's fairly cost effective to shoot it. As I said, they cast it very well with Wes Bentley, Kate Bosworth. It's definitely a thriller. There's some really thrilling, scary moments in it, creepy, scary moments in it. They can use those in the trailer to attract that kind of crowd that wants to see a thriller. And then again, they bring in Michael to direct it, who brings a real solid artistic sensibility to this film. And, the finished product comes across pretty well. It's definitely much better than a lot of these low budget thriller movies that you might see. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.